The blood-red sun cast long shadows across the dusty trail as Beatrice Sullivan watched in horror as the last wagon of the train disappeared over the horizon. Her belongings, what little they had allowed her to keep, lay scattered around her feet like broken promises. The year was 1858, and being abandoned in the Wyoming Territory was as good as a death sentence for a woman alone. "They can't just leave me here," Beatrice whispered, her voice cracking as the reality of her situation sank in. The wagon master had made his decision after her uncle, her only remaining family, had died from fever 3 days prior. No room, they'd said. No one willing to take responsibility for another mouth to feed. At 22, Beatrice was considered a burden, not an asset. The distant rumble of hoofbeats made her spin around, her heart hammering against her ribs. A lone rider approached from the east, his silhouette growing larger against the setting sun. Beatrice glanced around frantically for somewhere to hide, but the vast emptiness of the plains offered no shelter. She clutched her small knife inside her skirt pocket, the only protection she had. The rider slowed his approach, and Beatrice caught her first clear glimpse of him. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face partially hidden beneath the brim of his hat. His horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, snorted and pawed at the ground as the man pulled to a stop several feet away. "Madam," he said, his voice deep and rough like gravel. He tipped his hat, revealing piercing blue eyes that assessed her situation in seconds. "Looks like you've been left behind." Beatrice lifted her chin despite the tear tracks staining her cheeks. "The wagon master decided I wasn't worth the trouble after my uncle passed." The stranger's expression hardened. "Name's Logan Zachary. I've been tracking that wagon train for 2 days." He dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. "You can't stay here. Coyotes will be out soon, not to mention other dangers." "I have nowhere to go," Beatrice admitted, hating how vulnerable she sounded. Logan's eyes softened just a fraction. "You'll go with me now. My ranch is 3 days' ride south of here. I can get you someplace safe, at least until you figure things out." Beatrice hesitated. Going with a stranger presented its own dangers, but dying alone in the wilderness was a certainty. "I don't even know you, Mr. Zachary." "No, you don't," he agreed. "But I give you my word as a gentleman that no harm will come to you under my protection." He gestured toward her scattered belongings. "Let's gather your things before we lose the light." With few options available, Beatrice nodded. "My name is Beatrice Sullivan." Logan helped her collect her meager possessions, a small trunk of clothing, a family Bible, and a few cooking implements she'd managed to keep. He secured everything to his horse with practiced efficiency. "Can you ride?" he asked, eyeing her full skirts. "Yes, my father taught me before he died." Logan nodded, then offered his cupped hands to boost her onto his horse. Beatrice hesitated only a moment before placing her boot in his palms and allowing him to lift her into the saddle. He mounted behind her, his chest warm against her back as he reached around to take the reins. "Hold tight, Miss Sullivan. We've got a ways to go before we can make camp." As they rode away from the abandoned trail, Beatrice couldn't help but wonder if she'd just made a terrible mistake. Yet something about the steady way Logan held the reins, the respectful distance he tried to maintain despite their shared saddle, gave her hope that perhaps this cowboy's arrival was providence rather than peril. The first night on the trail, Logan made camp in a small grove of cottonwoods near a creek. He worked methodically, setting up a small fire and unrolling his bedroll for Beatrice. "You'll sleep here," he said, gesturing to the blankets. "I'll keep watch, Mr. Zachary." "Logan," he corrected. "Logan," Beatrice said, testing the name on her tongue. "You need to rest as well." He shook his head. "I've gone longer without sleep. Out here, vigilance keeps you alive." Beatrice watched him as he prepared a simple supper of beans and hardtack. His movements were efficient, those of a man accustomed to surviving on his own. Yet there was a gentleness to him she hadn't expected. "Why were you following the wagon train?" she asked as he handed her a tin plate of food. Logan's jaw tightened. "They came through my property. Took some of my cattle." His eyes met hers. "I wasn't planning to harm anyone, just get what's mine back. And now I've got more pressing concerns." He nodded toward her. "Eat. You'll need your strength." Beatrice obeyed, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. As she ate, she studied Logan covertly. He was older than her, perhaps 30, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years squinting in the sun. His hands were calloused, his clothing worn but clean. Everything about him suggested a hard life. Yet there was an undeniable honor in the way he carried himself. When they finished eating, Logan cleaned the plates in the creek while Beatrice changed behind a tree into her nightgown, draping her dress over a low branch. When she returned to the fire, wrapped in a shawl for modesty, she found Logan staring into the flames, lost in thought. "Thank you," she said softly, "for stopping. Most would have ridden past." He looked up, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. "Get some rest, Miss Sullivan. Morning comes early." Beatrice slipped under the blankets of his bedroll, aware that the fabric smelled of leather, smoke, and something uniquely male. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was elusive as she watched Logan's silhouette against the starlit sky. 3 days, she thought. 3 days until they reached his ranch, and then what? What future awaited a woman alone in this untamed land? Dawn broke with a chorus of birdsong. Beatrice awoke to find Logan already up, brewing coffee over a small fire. He offered her a cup without speaking, his eyes focused on the horizon. "Sleep well?" he finally asked as she sipped the bitter brew. "Well enough," she replied. "And you?" "I've had worse nights." He stood, stretching his tall frame. "We should move on. I want to make it to Elk Creek by nightfall." They ate a quick breakfast of jerky and the last of the hardtack. Then Logan efficiently packed up the camp. When it came time to mount, he again offered his cupped hands, his touch impersonal yet somehow comforting. Beatrice settled into the saddle, and they set off across the rolling plains. The day was hot, the sun beating down mercilessly. Logan shared his canteen freely, making sure Beatrice drank despite her protests that he should conserve water for himself. "There's a spring ahead," he assured her. "We'll refill there." Around midday, they stopped in the shade of a lone oak tree. Logan helped Beatrice down, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary before he quickly stepped away. "Rest here," he said gruffly. "I'll check the surroundings." While he scouted, Beatrice stretched her aching legs and tried to tidy her appearance. Her hair had come loose from its pins, and dust coated her face and clothing. She wished desperately for a proper bath, aware of how disheveled she must look. When Logan returned, he carried a handful of wild berries. "Found these growing nearby," he said, offering them to her. "They'll help with the thirst." The small gesture touched Beatrice deeply. She accepted the berries, their sweet, tart flavor bursting on her tongue. "You're kind, Mr. Logan," she corrected herself. He looked away, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Just practical. Can't have you fainting from hunger or thirst." They continued their journey, the rhythm of the horse's gait lulling Beatrice into a contemplative silence. She wondered about the man behind her. What had shaped him into this solitary figure? Was there a wife waiting at the ranch he spoke of? "Do you have family?" she ventured to ask as they crossed a shallow stream. Logan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Not anymore," he finally said. "My parents died when I was 16. My brother 2 years later in a mining accident. I'm sorry," Beatrice said softly. "I know what it's like to lose those you love." "Your uncle was your last kin," she nodded, though he couldn't see it. "My mother died birthing me. My father raised me until consumption took him 5 years ago. Uncle Thomas took me in, but he was never particularly fond of me. Yet you joined him on the Wagon train west. What choice did I have? A spinster has few options in this world." Logan made a noncommittal sound. "Plenty of men out west looking for wives. Good land, too. Opportunity for those willing to work hard." "Is that what brought you here? Opportunity?" "Something like that," he replied, and Beatrice sensed he wouldn't elaborate further. By late afternoon, thunder rumbled in the distance. Dark clouds gathered to the west, and a cool breeze stirred the tall grass around them. "Storm's coming," Logan said grimly. "We need to find shelter." He urged the horse into a faster pace, scanning the horizon. After a tense half-hour, during which the sky grew increasingly threatening, he pointed toward a rocky outcropping. There might be a cave or at least an overhang. They reached the rocks just as the first heavy drops began to fall. Logan quickly dismounted and helped Beatrice down, then led his horse around the outcropping. To their relief, a shallow cave offered protection from the elements. "It's not much," Logan said as he unloaded their essential supplies, "but it'll keep us dry." The storm hit with sudden ferocity, sheets of rain driven by howling wind. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the cramped confines of their shelter. The horse nickered nervously, and Logan moved to soothe it, murmuring calm words as he stroked its neck. Beatrice huddled against the cave wall, shivering as the temperature dropped. Logan noticed and removed his coat, draping it around her shoulders despite her protest. "You need it more than I do," he insisted. The coat enveloped her in warmth and his scent. Beatrice pulled it tighter, watching as Logan attempted to start a small fire near the cave entrance where the smoke could escape. "How much longer to your ranch?" she asked over the storm's roar. "If the rain lets up by morning, we can make it by tomorrow evening." He glanced at her. "You holding up all right?" Beatrice managed a smile. "I'm tougher than I look, Mr. Zachary." For the first time since they'd met, Logan's lips curved into a hint of a smile. "I'm starting to see that." The fire caught, casting flickering light across the cave walls. Logan settled opposite Beatrice, his back against stone, one knee drawn up with his arm resting upon it. The firelight played across his features, softening the hard lines of his face. "When we reach your ranch," Beatrice began hesitantly. "What then?" Logan considered her question. "There's a town about 10 miles from my property. Pine Creek has a small hotel. You could stay there while you decide your next move." "And how would I pay for this hotel?" Beatrice asked practically. Logan frowned, clearly not having considered this detail. "I'll cover it until you find work. The general store might need help, or the schoolhouse." "I don't want charity, Logan." His eyes met hers across the fire. "It's not charity, it's an investment in your future." The way he said it made Beatrice's heart beat faster. There was something in his gaze, something warm that belied his gruff exterior. The storm raged through the night. They ate a meager supper of the last jerky, and when it came time to sleep, the small size of the cave meant they had no choice but to lie close together. Logan insisted Beatrice take the only blanket, while he made do with his saddle as a pillow. Despite their proximity, Logan maintained a respectful distance. But in the deepest part of the night, when the cold seeped through the blanket, Beatrice found herself moving closer to his warmth. Half asleep, she wasn't sure if she imagined it when his arm cautiously draped across her, providing both heat and security. Morning brought clear skies and a brilliant sunrise. Beatrice woke to find herself alone in the cave, Logan's coat still wrapped around her shoulders. Panic fluttered in her chest until she heard movement outside. She quickly straightened her clothing and hair before emerging. Logan stood beside his horse, checking the saddle. He glanced up as she approached, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "There's a stream just beyond those rocks," he said. "If you want to, freshen up." Beatrice realized he was offering her privacy for her morning ablutions. "Thank you," she said gratefully, gathering her small bag of toiletries. The cool water was heavenly against her skin. Beatrice washed as thoroughly as possible, changed her undergarments, and redonned her wrinkled dress. She rebraided her hair, wishing for a mirror but doing the best she could by feel. When she returned, Logan had packed their belongings and prepared a small breakfast of freshly picked berries. He'd also refilled their water canteen. "We should reach my land by dusk," he said as they ate. "There's a creek crossing ahead that might slow us down, depending on how high the water is after the storm." True to his prediction, the creek had swollen to twice its normal size. They reached it midday, the water rushing over its banks in a frothy torrent. Logan dismounted to assess the situation, walking along the bank with a frown. "The usual crossing's too dangerous," he decided. "We'll have to head downstream to the shallows." The detour cost them precious time, and the sun was already lowering in the sky when they finally made it across. Logan pushed a harder pace afterward, his body tense against Beatrice's back. "Something wrong?" she asked, sensing his unease. "This area's known for bandits," he replied quietly. "I'd rather not be caught in the open after dark." Beatrice's hands tightened on the saddle horn. "Bandits, like outlaws, men who prey on travelers. They normally avoid those who look like they can defend themselves, but a man traveling with a woman might seem like an easier target," she finished for him. Logan nodded grimly. "Just stay alert." They rode in tense silence as shadows lengthened across the landscape. Beatrice found herself studying every rock and bush, imagining dangers lurking behind each one. When a rabbit suddenly darted across their path, she gasped, pressing back involuntarily against Logan's chest. His arm steadied her. "Easy," he murmured near her ear, his breath warm against her skin. Just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Logan pointed ahead. "There," he said with evident relief. "That rise marks the northern boundary of my property." Beatrice squinted, making out a distant line of fence posts. Beyond them, she could just see what appeared to be buildings nestled in a valley, wisps of smoke rising from chimneys. "Your ranch," she breathed. "Home," Logan confirmed, a note of pride in his voice. As they crested the rise, the full extent of Logan's property came into view. A neat wooden ranch house sat in the center of a fenced yard, flanked by a large barn and several smaller outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, dark shapes against the twilight landscape. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwoods and willows. "It's beautiful," Beatrice said sincerely. Logan made a gruff sound of acknowledgement, but she could sense his pleasure at her approval. As they approached, a figure emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. Logan raised his arm in greeting and the figure lowered the weapon. "That's Samuel," Logan explained. "My foreman. Good man." Samuel proved to be a weathered man in his 50s with a gray-streaked beard and kind eyes. He watched with poorly concealed curiosity as Logan helped Beatrice dismount. "Boss," Samuel nodded, then tipped his hat to Beatrice. "Madam." "Samuel, this is Miss Beatrice Sullivan," Logan said. "She'll be staying with us for a time. Miss Sullivan, Samuel Wilson, best foreman in the territory." Samuel's eyebrows rose slightly, but he merely nodded. "Pleasure, Miss Sullivan. Didn't know we were expecting company." Miss Sullivan was abandoned by the Thompson wagon train, Logan explained, his voice hardening. "The same train that helped themselves to our cattle. Understanding dawned on Samuel's face. "I see." He turned to Beatrice. "You're welcome here, Mrs. Cooper will be pleased to have another woman around." "Mrs. Cooper?" Beatrice questioned. "Our cook and housekeeper," Logan explained, leading the way toward the main house. "She lives in the small cabin behind the house with her husband, our blacksmith." Relief washed over Beatrice. The presence of a married couple, especially a woman, would help quiet any concerns about propriety. The main house was modest but well built, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Inside, oil lamps cast a warm glow over simple but sturdy furniture. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and the smell of something delicious filled the air. A plump woman in her 60s hurried in from what Beatrice assumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She stopped short at the sight of Beatrice, her eyes widening before darting to Logan. "Mrs. Cooper, this is Miss Sullivan," Logan said. "She'll be staying with us while she decides her next steps. She needs a room and a hot meal." "Of course, Mr. Zachary," Mrs. Cooper recovered quickly, her motherly instincts clearly taking over. "You poor dear, you look exhausted. Come with me, I'll show you to the guest room and draw you a bath." The prospect of a real bath nearly brought tears to Beatrice's eyes. She glanced at Logan, who nodded encouragingly. "Go on. Get settled. We can talk in the morning, Mrs. Cooper led Beatrice to a small but clean bedroom at the back of the house. A double bed with a colorful quilt dominated the space, alongside a washstand, wardrobe, and rocking chair by the window. "It's not fancy," Mrs. Cooper apologized, "but it's comfortable." "It's wonderful," Beatrice assured her sincerely. While Mrs. Cooper prepared the bath in a separate washroom, Beatrice unpacked her meager belongings. Most of her dresses were wrinkled beyond redemption, and she wondered if she could borrow an iron in the morning. The bath was everything she'd dreamed of during their journey. Hot water eased the aches in her muscles, and the lavender-scented soap Mrs. Cooper provided felt like an unimaginable luxury. Beatrice washed her hair thoroughly, then wrapped herself in the clean nightgown and robe the older woman had loaned her. By the time she returned to the kitchen, a plate of roast beef, potatoes, and greens awaited her. Logan was nowhere in sight, but Mrs. Cooper hovered nearby, clearly bursting with questions. "Mr. Zachary said you were left behind by a wagon train," the housekeeper finally ventured as Beatrice ate. Beatrice nodded, swallowing a bite of the delicious food. "My uncle died, and they decided they couldn't spare room for me." She kept her tone matter-of-fact, though the memory still stung. Mrs. Cooper clicked her tongue in disapproval. "Heartless, that's what that is. Good thing Mr. Zachary found you." "Yes," Beatrice agreed softly. "Good thing." After the meal, exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. Mrs. Cooper noticed her struggling to keep her eyes open and shooed her off to bed. The clean sheets and soft mattress felt like heaven after nights on the hard ground, and Beatrice fell asleep almost instantly. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the distant sounds of activity from the ranch yard. For a moment, she was disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing her sleep-fogged mind. Then memory rushed back. Logan, the journey, the ranch. A soft knock at the door preceded Mrs. Cooper's entrance with a tray of breakfast. "Good morning, dear. Thought you might want to eat before facing the day." "That's very kind, thank you." Beatrice sat up, accepting the tray of eggs, bacon, and biscuits with coffee. "What time is it?" "Nearly 9. Mr. Zachary said to let you sleep as long as you needed." Mrs. Cooper bustled around the room, opening the curtains wider. "I've laid out one of my daughter's old dresses for you. She's closer to your size than I am. I'll wash and press your things today." After breakfast and dressing in the borrowed blue calico, which fit reasonably well despite being a bit loose in the bodice, Beatrice ventured outside. The ranch was alive with activity, cowboys moving cattle in a distant pasture. A man she assumed was Mr. Cooper working at the forge, chickens scratching in the yard. She found Logan by the corral, watching as a young cowboy worked with a spirited black horse. He turned at her approach, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "You look rested," he observed. "I feel human again," Beatrice admitted with a small smile. "Thank you for your hospitality." Logan nodded toward the horse in the corral. "That's Midnight, been breaking him for a month now. He's almost ready to join the remuda." Beatrice watched the magnificent animal, admiring his glossy coat and proud bearing. "He's beautiful." "He is," Logan agreed, a note of pride in his voice. "I bred him myself from my best stock." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the young cowboy work the horse around the corral. Beatrice was acutely aware of Logan beside her, his tall frame casting a shadow that encompassed her. "I should speak with you about your plans," Logan finally said, turning to face her. "Samuel's riding into Pine Creek this afternoon. He could take you to the hotel I mentioned." Beatrice's heart sank at the thought of leaving so soon. Yes, I suppose that would be best." Logan studied her face. "Unless you'd prefer to stay here a bit longer, get your bearings." Hope fluttered in Beatrice's chest. "I wouldn't want to impose. It's not an imposition. The ranch could use an extra pair of hands, and Mrs. Cooper would appreciate the help." "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Zachary?" His lips quirked. "I thought we'd moved past formalities, Beatrice." The sound of her name on his lips sent a curious warmth through her. "Logan, then. Are you offering me a job, room, board, and a small wage until you decide your next move?" He looked away across the pastures. "It's not charity, you'd be earning your keep." Beatrice considered the offer. Staying meant safety, security, and time to plan her future. It also meant more time with Logan, a prospect that appealed to her more than she cared to admit. "I accept," she said finally. "Thank you." Relief flickered across his features. "Good. Mrs. Cooper will show you around the house. We can discuss your duties over supper." As the days passed, Beatrice settled into life at the Zachary Ranch. Mrs. Cooper taught her the routines of managing the household, how to preserve the garden's bounty for winter, the proper way to make soap from rendered fat and lye, which cowboys preferred their shirts starched, and which didn't. Logan was often absent during the days, working with his men or riding the boundaries of his sizable property. But in the evenings, he would join Beatrice and the Coopers for supper, listening attentively as Beatrice recounted her day's accomplishments or asked questions about ranch operations. A tentative friendship formed between them, built on small moments, Logan bringing Beatrice a wildflower he'd spotted while riding, Beatrice making sure his favorite apple pie was served after a particularly long day in the saddle. They learned each other's habits and preferences without needing to discuss them, a quiet understanding developing through observation rather than words. 2 weeks after her arrival, Logan found Beatrice in the garden, harvesting late summer tomatoes. He watched her work for a moment before clearing his throat to announce his presence. "Samuel tells me there's a social in Pine Creek this Saturday," he said without preamble. "Thought you might like to attend, meet some of the townspeople." Beatrice straightened, brushing soil from her hands. "That sounds lovely, but I wouldn't want to impose on Samuel's time." "I'd take you myself," Logan clarified, a hint of color touching his cheekbones, "if you'd like to go." The invitation surprised and pleased her. "I'd like that very much." Logan nodded, seeming satisfied. "We'll leave after the morning chores on Saturday then." Saturday dawned clear and warm. Beatrice dressed carefully in her best gown, a cornflower blue that brought out her eyes, freshly washed and pressed by her own hands. Mrs. Cooper helped arrange her hair, twisting the golden brown locks into an elegant knot at the nape of her neck. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Cooper said, stepping back to admire her work. "Mr. Zachary won't know what hit him." Beatrice blushed. "It's not like that, Mrs. Cooper." The older woman just smiled knowingly. "If you say so, dear." When Beatrice emerged from the house, Logan was waiting by a small buggy, dressed in clean clothes with his hair neatly combed. He stared at her for a long moment before remembering his manners and offering his hand to help her into the seat. "You look very nice," he said, his usual eloquence deserting him. "Thank you," Beatrice replied, equally flustered by his appearance. Without his customary hat, she could see that his dark hair curled slightly at the ends, giving him a more approachable look. The ride to Pine Creek took just under an hour. Logan pointed out landmarks along the way, telling Beatrice about the history of the area and how he'd come to settle there 8 years earlier. "Land was cheap back then," he explained. "Had to clear most of it myself. Started with just 20 head of cattle and that cabin there." He pointed to a small structure visible in the distance. "Now I've got over 500 head and 8,000 acres. You've accomplished a lot," Beatrice said admiringly. "You should be proud." Logan shrugged, but she could tell her words pleased him. "Still a lot to do. Planning to expand the operation next spring. Maybe add some horses to the business." Pine Creek proved to be larger than Beatrice had expected, with a main street boasting a general store, hotel, saloon, church, schoolhouse, and several other businesses. People greeted Logan with respect as he helped Beatrice down from the buggy, curious eyes taking in her presence at his side. The social was held in the town hall, a simple building with a wooden floor cleared for dancing. A small band played lively tunes in the corner, and tables laden with food lined one wall. Women in their best dresses chatted while children ran underfoot and men gathered in groups, discussing cattle prices and weather predictions. Logan kept a protective hand at the small of Beatrice's back as he introduced her to the townspeople. "Miss Sullivan is staying at my ranch while she decides on her future plans," he explained repeatedly, his tone discouraging any speculation about their arrangement. Despite his efforts, Beatrice noticed the knowing glances exchanged between the women and the appraising looks from the men. A community this size rarely saw new faces, especially unattached young women. "Mr. Zachary, you've been holding out on us," said a jovial man Logan introduced as the mayor. "Had I known a lady as lovely as Miss Sullivan was staying at your ranch, I'd have made a social call myself." Logan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Miss Sullivan has been recovering from a difficult journey." The afternoon progressed pleasantly enough. Beatrice danced with several of the local men, including the schoolteacher, the general store owner's son, and the young doctor who'd recently set up practice in town. All were respectful but clearly interested, making Beatrice uncomfortably aware of her status as one of the few eligible women in the area. Throughout it all, Logan watched from the sidelines, declining to dance himself, but never taking his eyes off her. When the band struck up a waltz, he finally approached, extending his hand in silent invitation. Surprised but pleased, Beatrice accepted, allowing him to lead her onto the floor. He was an unexpectedly good dancer, guiding her with confidence through the steps. His hand at her waist was warm and steady, his touch proper yet somehow intimate. "You dance well," she observed, looking up at him. "My mother insisted I learn," he replied, a rare mention of his past. "Said no son of hers would embarrass himself at social gatherings. She taught you well." Logan's eyes softened. "She'd have liked you. Strong woman like yourself, never backed down from a challenge." The compliment warmed Beatrice more than it should have. As they moved around the floor, she became increasingly aware of the subtle cedar scent of his soap, the way his hand engulfed hers, the controlled strength in his frame. The waltz ended too soon, and Logan reluctantly released her. Beatrice's hand felt strangely empty without his, and she flexed her fingers to dispel the sensation. They stayed until late afternoon, when Logan suggested they start back before dusk. As they prepared to leave, the young doctor, Dr. James Anderson, approached Beatrice. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Miss Sullivan," he said, smiling warmly. "I hope you'll consider visiting my office if you decide to stay in Pine Creek. I'm always looking for a competent assistant, and you mentioned experience helping your father with his patients." "That's very kind of you, Doctor Anderson," Beatrice replied, genuinely flattered by the offer. Logan's expression remained neutral, but Beatrice noticed how his shoulders tensed as he helped her into the buggy. They were halfway home before he broke the silence. "Anderson seems interested in your medical skills." Beatrice glanced at him, surprised by his tone. He was being polite. He was being more than polite. Logan kept his eyes on the road. "Might be a good opportunity for you. Steady work. Respectable position." "Perhaps," Beatrice agreed non-committally. Logan fell silent again, his jaw working as if chewing over unspoken words. Finally, he said, "You had many admirers today." "They were just being neighborly," Beatrice demurred, though she knew it wasn't entirely true. "The school teacher asked if you were spoken for," Logan said abruptly. "Thomas Miller. Good man. Educated back east." Beatrice's heart sank inexplicably. "And what did you tell him?" "That you were free to make your own decisions." The answer should have pleased her Logan, respecting her autonomy, yet disappointment curled in her stomach. "I see," was all she could manage. The remainder of the journey passed in awkward silence, the easy camaraderie of the morning replaced by unspoken tension. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was setting, painting the landscape in gold and crimson. Logan helped Beatrice down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Their eyes met briefly before he looked away. "Thank you for today," Beatrice said softly. "I enjoyed meeting everyone." Logan nodded, his expression inscrutable in the fading light. "Good night, Beatrice." As she prepared for bed that evening, Beatrice found herself replaying every interaction with Logan, analyzing his words and expressions for hidden meaning. Was he encouraging her to accept Dr. Anderson's offer? Did he want her to consider the schoolteacher as a potential suitor? Or was he, perhaps, testing her interest in staying closer to the ranch, closer to him? The following days brought a noticeable shift in their relationship. Logan seemed more reserved, spending longer hours away from the house. When they did interact, his manner was polite but distant, as if he'd erected an invisible barrier between them. A week after the social, Beatrice was hanging laundry when she overheard a conversation between Logan and Samuel near the barn. The men's voices carried clearly in the still autumn air. "Miller came by asking about her again," Samuel was saying. "Says he's looking for a wife before winter sets in." "That's Beatrice's business, not mine," Logan replied, his voice tight. "Seems to me you've got some interest in making it your business," Samuel said carefully. A long pause followed. "She deserves better than this," Logan finally said. "A proper home, children, security, not a hardscrabble existence with a man who can barely carry a conversation." "That should be her choice, don't you think?" Samuel pressed. "Woman's got a mind of her own." Logan didn't respond, and moments later, Beatrice heard the sound of boots on gravel, then hoofbeats as he rode away. That evening, Logan didn't return for supper. Mrs. Cooper explained that he'd ridden to check on a distant herd and wouldn't be back until the following day. Beatrice ate mechanically, her appetite diminished by the conversation she'd overheard. He thought himself unworthy of her. The realization both frustrated and touched her. How could he not see that she had already chosen where she wanted to be? The next morning, Beatrice made a decision. After breakfast, she asked Mr. Cooper to drive her into town, claiming she needed supplies that weren't on the regular order. The kindly blacksmith agreed without question, and by mid-morning they were on their way to Pine Creek. Once there, Beatrice's first stop was the general store where she purchased fabric, thread, and other necessities. Then, steeling herself, she walked to the small building that housed Dr. Anderson's practice. The young doctor greeted her warmly, clearly pleased by her visit. They spoke at length about his practice, the needs of the community, and the position he had available. "It would be an honor to have someone with your experience assist me," Dr. Anderson said earnestly. "And perhaps, in time, our professional relationship might develop into something more personal." Beatrice regarded him thoughtfully. He was handsome, educated, and kind, everything a sensible woman should want in a potential husband. Yet she felt nothing when he smiled at her, no quickening of her pulse or flutter in her stomach. "You're very kind, Dr. Anderson," she said carefully. "But I must be honest, my heart lies elsewhere." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Zachary," he said simply. Beatrice nodded, not bothering to deny it. "He's a good man," Dr. Anderson acknowledged with a slight smile. "Stubborn as they come, but good. Does he know how you feel?" "I'm not certain he wants to know," Beatrice admitted. Dr. Anderson chuckled. "From what I've seen, that man's been fighting his feelings for you since you walked into the social on his arm." He leaned forward. "Sometimes, Miss Sullivan, the bravest souls on the frontier need a little help seeing what's right in front of them." Beatrice left the doctor's office with renewed determination. On the way back to the ranch, she formulated her plan, going over what she would say when Logan returned. But Logan didn't return that evening, nor the following morning. Samuel explained that he'd encountered trouble with rustlers and had decided to camp with the herd for a few days until the threat passed. 4 days later, Beatrice was beginning to worry when she heard commotion in the yard. She rushed outside to find Logan dismounting from his horse, his clothes dusty and a dark stubble shadowing his jaw. Her heart leaped at the sight of him, then plummeted when she saw the blood staining his left sleeve. "You're hurt," she gasped, hurrying forward. Logan looked up, surprise and something else, pleasure, flickering across his tired features. "It's nothing, just a graze." "Let me see," Beatrice insisted, already reaching for his arm. Logan allowed her to lead him into the house, where she made him sit at the kitchen table while she gathered water, clean cloths, and the medical supplies she kept in her room. Mrs. Cooper hovered anxiously until Beatrice gently shooed her away, promising to call if she needed assistance. "What happened?" Beatrice asked as she carefully cut away the sleeve of his shirt. Logan winced slightly as the fabric pulled away from the wound. "Caught up with the rustlers. One of them got off a lucky shot before they ran." The injury was indeed a graze, but deep enough to require cleaning and stitching. Beatrice worked methodically, using the skills her father had taught her. Logan remained silent, watching her face as she concentrated on her task. "You have steady hands," he observed quietly. "My father was a doctor," Beatrice replied, threading a needle. "He taught me well." She paused, meeting his gaze. "This will hurt," Logan nodded. "I trust you." The simple statement made her heart skip. She worked carefully, placing neat stitches to close the wound. Logan didn't flinch, though she knew it must be painful. "Dr. Anderson offered me a position as his assistant," she said conversationally as she tied off the last stitch. Logan's muscles tensed beneath her fingers. "When?" "I visited him while you were gone." Beatrice began bandaging the wound. "He was quite enthusiastic about my qualifications." I see, Logan said flatly. When will you start? Beatrice secured the bandage and finally looked up, meeting his guarded expression. I declined his offer. Surprise flickered across Logan's face. Why, it's a good position, respectable. Better than being a ranch hand. Because it's not what I want. Beatrice took a deep breath, gathering her courage. I overheard you talking with Samuel before you left about Mr. Miller and other things. Logan's jaw tightened, a flush creeping up his neck. You shouldn't have heard that. But I did. Beatrice laid her hand gently on his uninjured arm. And I think you're wrong, about what I deserve, about what I want. Logan looked away, his throat working. Beatrice, no, please let me finish. She moved to stand before him, forcing him to meet her gaze. When the wagon train left me behind, I thought my life was over. Then you appeared and everything changed. You gave me safety, respect, and purpose. But more than that, you gave me a home. Her voice softened. And somewhere along the way, you claimed my heart as well. Logan stared at her, disbelief and hope warring in his eyes. You can't mean that. You could have any man in the territory, the doctor, the schoolteacher men who could give you the life you deserve. The life I deserve is the one I choose, Beatrice said firmly. And I choose you, Logan Zachary. If you'll have me. For a long moment, Logan said nothing, and Beatrice's confidence began to falter. Had she misread his feelings entirely? Then, with a movement so swift it startled her, Logan stood and pulled her into his arms. His good hand cupped her face, thumb tracing the curve of her cheek as if memorizing its shape. I've been fighting this since the moment I found you, he confessed, his voice rough. Telling myself you deserved better, that you'd leave once you found your footing. That a woman like you couldn't possibly want a life with someone like me. You underestimate yourself, Beatrice whispered, her hands resting against his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palm. And you underestimate me. Logan's eyes darkened. I don't deserve you, Beatrice Sullivan. But if you'll have me, I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of your choice. You already are, she assured him. When his lips finally met hers, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, almost reverent, before deepening with a hunger that left them both breathless. Beatrice clung to him, pouring months of unspoken feelings into the embrace. They married 3 weeks later in the small church in Pine Creek. The entire community turned out for the occasion, along with the ranch hands and neighboring ranchers. Beatrice wore a new dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Cooper had helped her make, with tiny pearl buttons down the back that Logan would later confess drove him to distraction. Samuel stood as Logan's best man, beaming with satisfaction at the outcome he'd clearly predicted. Dr. Anderson attended with gracious congratulations, and even the wagon master who had abandoned Beatrice months earlier appeared, hat in hand, to offer sheepish good wishes. Fate has a curious way of working out, Beatrice observed to her new husband as they danced at their wedding celebration. If the wagon train hadn't left me behind, we never would have met. Logan's arms tightened around her waist. I'd have found you somehow, he said with conviction. Some things are meant to be. They returned to the ranch that evening as husband and wife. Logan carried Beatrice across the threshold of the main house, their house now, with reverent care. The bedroom had been transformed with fresh linens, wildflowers in a pottery vase, and candles casting a golden glow across the polished wood furniture. Their coming together that night was both tender and passionate, a culmination of months of growing feelings and restrained desire. Logan worshipped Beatrice with gentle hands and whispered words of devotion, while she responded with equal fervor, her body and heart fully his. Afterward, as they lay entwined beneath the quilts, Beatrice traced idle patterns on her husband's chest. I never thanked you properly, she murmured. For what? Logan asked, his fingers combing through her loose hair. "For stopping that day. For saying you'll go with me now when I had nowhere else to go." Logan pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Best decision I ever made." The years that followed brought both joys and challenges. The ranch prospered under their joint stewardship, with Logan handling the cattle operation while Beatrice applied her organizational skills to the business side. Her medical knowledge proved invaluable not only to the ranch workers but to neighboring homesteads, and she occasionally assisted Dr. Anderson with particularly difficult cases. Their first child, a daughter they named Alina after Logan's mother, arrived 11 months after their wedding. She had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. 2 years later, a son joined the family, followed by twin boys 3 years after that. Through blizzards and droughts, through market fluctuations and the occasional conflict with rustlers or land grabbers, Logan and Beatrice faced each challenge together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. On their 10th anniversary, Logan surprised Beatrice with a trip back to the spot where they'd first met. The landscape had changed little, the same endless sky, the same rolling plains, but they had changed immeasurably. "Sometimes I still can't believe how fortunate I am," Logan said as they sat side by side on a blanket, watching the sunset paint the horizon in shades of gold and crimson. "That day, I was tracking stolen cattle, and instead, I found the greatest treasure of my life." Beatrice leaned against his shoulder, her hand finding his. "And I was certain my life was over, only to discover it was just beginning." "No regrets?" Logan asked, an echo of uncertainty in his voice even after a decade of happiness. Beatrice turned to face him, taking in the face she had loved for so long, the same strong jaw, now with threads of silver in his dark hair, the same blue eyes that still made her heart race. "Not one," she assured him, leaning in to seal her words with a kiss. "Being left behind turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me." As they rode home in the gathering twilight, Beatrice thought about the long journey from that desperate day to the rich, full life they'd built together. From an abandoned woman with no prospects to a beloved wife, mother, and respected member of the community. The ranch came into view, lamplight gleaming from the windows of their home where Samuel's wife was watching over their children. Smoke curled from the chimney, and in the distance, cattle grazed peacefully under the watchful eyes of their cowboys. Logan's arm tightened around her waist as they approached. "Welcome home, Mrs. Zachary," he said softly, the words a cherished ritual between them. "Home," Beatrice agreed, leaning back against the solid strength of the man who had found her when she was lost, the man who had said those life-changing words so many years ago. "You'll go with me now," and she had never looked back.